There's always been a puzzling double standard when it comes to men and women's desires. Tell me, why is it that when a single man has a high libido and pursues multiple partners, he's praised as a Casanova or a ladies' man? But when a woman embraces her own desires just as openly, the words used to describe her are far less flattering. We're in the 21st century now. I'm not saying we should throw all morals out the window and dive headfirst into total debauchery. But I am tired of the outdated and sexist comparison that men love to throw around. If a key opens many locks, it's a great key. But if a lock can be opened by many keys, it's a bad lock. Today, I want to tell you about 5 famous and successful women who lived by their own rules, despite being judged for it. But let's be clear, these women weren't simply locks being opened. They made their own choices, exercised their power, and, in many cases, turned the tables on the very men who thought they were in control. Virginia Oldoini, Countess of Castiglione. Italian women have always been famous for their passion. So when Virginia Oldoini was born in Tuscany in 1837, it was clear from a young age that she was destined for an extraordinary life. Coming from a minor noble family, her virginity was guarded fiercely. Her parents planned to arrange a strategic marriage. At 17, which, back then, was already considered late for marriage, she wed a man 12 years her senior. At first, their marriage seemed happy, despite the political turmoil in Italy, which was still a collection of fragmented states. But then, Virginia's ambitious cousin had an idea. She should seduce Napoleon III of France. Why? Because he could help unite Italy. And she did. With her husband's unspoken approval, she became Napoleon's lover and used her influence over him to push for Italian unification. She fought countless bedroom battles for her country, and her efforts paid off. Napoleon eventually deployed French troops to support Italy's cause. But Napoleon was just the beginning. Virginia realized that her beauty gave her immense power over men, and she began to use it to her advantage. She took lovers from the highest ranks of society and was paid lavishly for her services, including introducing young men to the pleasures of adulthood. Legend has it that one nobleman, Lord Hertford, was so captivated by her that he offered her 1,000,000 francs for just one night, on the condition that he could do absolutely anything he wanted. She accepted, and, according to the story, she was unable to sit down for 3 days afterward. Her husband? He didn't mind at all. In fact, thanks to Virginia's affairs, he gained wealth, land, and social status. Virginia also left her mark in another way, through photography. She became one of the most photographed women of the 19th century, posing for hundreds of portraits that scandalized society. Some of these images were highly erotic, pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable at the time. Peggy Guggenheim was one of the most fascinating women of the early 20th century. The daughter of industrial magnate Benjamin Guggenheim, who famously perished on the Titanic, Peggy inherited an enormous fortune and lived life to the fullest until her death in 1979. But before you assume this means a life of wild parties and extravagant luxury, think again. Peggy's passion wasn't just for pleasure, it was for art. She was a patron of artists, a collector, and a major force in the modern art world. With the financial backing of her influential uncle, Solomon Guggenheim, she opened museums and galleries across the US and Europe. That said, she was no saint when it came to her personal life. She was married twice and had 2 children, but she never pretended to be faithful. In fact, she saw seduction as an art form in itself. In her autobiography, she openly admitted to having over 1,000 lovers, including some of the greatest artists and musicians of her time. Many of them even owed their careers to her, as she often tested their talents in the bedroom before deciding to support them financially. She was particularly drawn to artists like Jackson Pollock and Max Ernst, not just because of their talent, but because she found their minds and bodies equally fascinating. Some of them, like Ernst, even became her husbands or long-term partners. Despite her wealth, Peggy had an eccentric side. She was known for wearing large, flamboyant sunglasses and dressing in extravagant outfits. Her Venetian home, which later became the Peggy Guggenheim Collection, was filled with avant-garde artwork that she had personally chosen, often from her lovers. When people think of powerful women who used their charm to control men, Cleopatra often comes to mind. But Queen Nzinga of Matamba in modern-day Angola was just as fierce. Born in 1583 into a royal family, Nzinga took the throne in 1618 after eliminating her brother, who had betrayed their kingdom to the Portuguese. And once she was in power, she ruled on her own terms. Matamba was a major center of the African slave trade, and Nzinga understood the value of maintaining a loyal army. She kept a personal harem of male slaves and prisoners of war, who she forced to wear women's clothing, as she believed that surrendering in battle stripped them of their masculinity. But don't think for a second that they were just decorative. If any of them failed to please her, they were swiftly executed. Nzinga was ruthless, brilliant, and completely unbothered by anyone's judgment. In 1701, Philip V of Spain married Maria Luisa of Savoy. At first glance, they seemed like the perfect royal couple, one that would lead Spain to prosperity. And in many ways, they did. But when it came to their private life, things were far more complicated. Philip V was a deeply devout Catholic. While he certainly enjoyed physical intimacy, he believed it should be reserved strictly for procreation. Anything beyond that, in his mind, was a sinful indulgence that could bring divine punishment. Maria Luisa, on the other hand, had a much more liberal outlook, along with an exceptionally high libido. Despite their vastly different views on intimacy, the couple found a way to compromise. Philip visited his wife when he felt it was time to produce an heir, while Maria Luisa maintained a selection of lovers for her own pleasure, with her husband's full approval. Sadly, Maria Luisa died young, passing away on February 14, 1714, at just 25 years old. Philip later remarried Elizabeth Farnese, who followed the same arrangement as her predecessor. And, interestingly enough, palace gossip suggested that whenever Philip did visit his wife's bedroom, he was insatiable. Yet no matter how much he indulged, religion remained the dominant force in his life. Closing our list is Tallulah Bankhead, an American actress of the early 20th century. She began acting in silent films at just 15 years old, and even at that young age, she had an unrestrained appetite for pleasure. With no hesitation, she seduced many of the most attractive actors of her time. Ironically, Tallulah was educated at an all-girls convent school, though that didn't stop her from experimenting with her classmates during their late-night escapades. By the time she reached 30, years of reckless indulgence had taken their toll, leading to a prolonged battle with sexually transmitted infections. But after leaving the hospital and recovering from most of her ailments, she didn't change her ways. Instead, she dove even deeper into her hedonistic lifestyle. Tallulah's life was so extraordinary that entire books have been written about her, some factual, others fictional. And to put it bluntly, these books portray her as far more adventurous than the famous French literary character Emmanuel, both in terms of the number of partners and the intensity of her experiences. In Tallulah Bankhead's personal life, there was nothing off limits. Perhaps that's why, after turning 50, she completely lost interest in relationships with men. She had already seen and done it all. Having lived through every possible temptation and indulgence, she was finally ready to slow down. So there you have it. 5 legendary women whose libidos rivaled and often surpassed those of the most infamous male lovers in history. Should they be judged for how they lived? That's up to you. But one thing is clear. They united nations, commanded armies, and even managed to find compromises with their husbands. So, what exactly is there to criticize?